Dear colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this professional session which focuses on one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the climate crisis. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Professor Alon, an internationally recognized expert in environmental policy, climate resilience, and sustainability. Professor Tal has served in various academic, governmental, and advisory roles, and we are grateful for the opportunity to benefit from his insights. This conversation is intended to provide us, as Supreme Audit Institution, with a broader understanding of climate risks, recent global trends, and the ways in which we can contribute through our audits and professional work. Professor Tal, would you kindly begin by briefly introducing yourself?
My name is Alon. I'm a professor at Tel Aviv University's Department of Public Policy. I have a long history both in civil society and in politics. I actually served as a parliamentarian. In the present context, I had the privilege of serving as a scientific advisor to the State Comptroller's Office of Israel in the special report they prepared in 2021 about climate change. But my academic specialization is environmental and climate policy, and I'm delighted to be here today for this discussion.
Could you elaborate on key issues related to climate risks?
The key climate risks, of course, depend on the specific location which we're talking about, but the general menu is the same around the world. We've seen an alarming increase in the number of serious fire incidents and forest fires, loss of woodlands. We've seen flooding. We've seen heat waves. I'm particularly concerned about the latter. We've seen record temperatures here in Israel. We had, for the merry month of May, which is still supposed to be springtime, we had up to 42 degrees this month of May. And our neighbors at the United Arab Emirates, they faced temperatures of 51 degrees in May. So this heat has created a situation where for many people in the Middle East, and I think now in Southern Europe, the difference between life and death can be an air conditioner. Just last year, 1,300 well-intentioned, inspired pilgrims came to Mecca for the Hajj, but they didn't have their hotel set up. They slept on the side of the roads, but as the temperatures climbed, they simply cooked, they baked to death and did not survive. So we are seeing a whole range of challenges and risks, not only to humans, of course, but to the ecologies of our countries.
Please update us on the most recent global developments regarding countries' preparedness for climate change and provide current examples for realized risks.
The question of a country's preparedness really comes down to how much are the cities ready? Because most of humanity today lives in cities. And what we see is all around the world, even the most developed countries, the climate crisis is here, ready or not, and we are not ready. Take a look at what happened in Los Angeles. 16,000 buildings burned, 29 people dead in one of the most sophisticated cities in the world. A lot of it could have been prevented if there had been much better implementation of building codes, if there had been greater emphasis placed on removing the vegetation and the fuel that connected the forest to the communities around there, if water supply had been better arranged. So I believe that we need to realize that climate change is not some sort of gloomy projection of scientists in the IPCC. No, it's a new reality. And the impacts that we're facing are coming much more rapidly and much more severely than we had imagined. So the role of all of us who care about human well-being, particularly those of you who are comptrollers and auditors, is to remind decision makers that climate change is no longer a luxury, but a pressing human health and welfare issue.
In your view, what should governments and relevant public institutions do in order to effectively prepare for climate-related risks?
Governments and public institutions have to step up. In the lead up to the 2021 Glasgow conference on climate change, many countries, including Israel, made long-term pledges that by 2050 we would have net zero emissions and essentially neutralize our carbon footprint. And that's great. But to leave those critical steps to future generations is simply irresponsible. So I think one of the things we need to start asking of governments is to create the benchmarks which will allow us to reach these objectives, which are so critical for addressing the climate crisis and leaving a planet that our children can live in. Right now, many countries have sort of, has to put paid lip service, but we know of the 107 countries that committed themselves to net zero emissions by 2050, only 5 have taken really concrete actions to do it. And I would quote here your most recent audit from less than a year ago, where you had a second report on climate, where you said that Israel really also has fallen way behind its own objectives. And I think that's what we need to do is insist that public decision makers not only make declarations, but take the concrete actions which are required to decarbonize our electricity grid, to move to a electric and non-emitting fleet of cars, to create a new kind of agriculture, which is methane free, and all those steps which we know scientists have told us for years what we need to do, but somehow or other have not really gotten into the public policy agenda. So now we have to understand that climate change is far too serious a challenge to leave as a spectator sport. We need players, and governments need to be involved.
What role should state audit institutions play in addressing the climate crisis?
You know, state audit institutions have some unique advantages that other players in the climate field do not enjoy. The first of which is a strong scientific literacy and integrity in their staff. So the ability to bring people from different disciplines and to integrate them and synthesize them and bring on advisors allows them to provide reports that are in-depth and are science-based. The second role that I think that state audit institutions have to have is really to play up their political neutrality. We live in an unfortunate age of polarization. All over the world, the public is being increasingly divided by divisive leaders, and a state audit institution's role is to be an authority that helps and represents everybody. And on this issue, particularly future generations, because we all ultimately want our children to live on a planet where the climate is reasonable and the environment is healthy. And so in this instance, state audit institutions enjoy I think, a unique status as being apolitical, rising above sometimes the heated and unnecessary debates, and providing objective analysis. And the third point, which I would really urge you to take on as state audit institutions, is to push decision makers to translate their long-term objectives and their highfalutin declarations into actual actions. And the ability to assess progress and call decision makers to count when they do not meet their promises, that's very, very important, because it's very, very easy for politicians to opt to deal with pressing issues, but not the long-term important ones. We all know that climate change is one which, if we don't address it, our children won't be able to deal with it so effectively. And so I would hope that utilizing your unique status and platform, you'll be able to continue to be a central force in national policies, translating vague objectives and international targets into concrete policy actions. And once those actions begin, monitoring how effective they are.
Could you share some of your experience as an advisor to the climate audit team of the Office of the State Controller of Israel and offer any insights or recommendations based on that work?
Like I said, as an Israeli academic, it was a privilege and an honor to work as a scientific advisor with the very talented staff that works here at the Israel State Controller's Office. It was also an eye-opening experience. One of the things that I found particularly valuable and unique here was the ability of the staff to integrate so much scientific information and pull examples from around the world. I think a comparative regulatory analysis is critical in these reports, which are prepared by state auditors in order to establish legitimacy and show that what they're expecting governments to do are not wild and extremist, but really based on the successes and the effective policies. In most cases in climate policy, we know, and I think your report showed it, that the actions that we need to do are cost effective. The so-called no regrets perspective, which says these are things we should be doing anyway. We should be using solar and wind energy because it's less expensive and it's cleaner and better for public health. And electric cars last longer, they don't make noise. Food that has a low carbon footprint usually is healthier. So we have a lot of, speaking specifically of the meat industry. So there's a lot of things which science tells us, and the state comptroller has an ability to translate this into a language that decision makers and the public can understand. And being part of that effort was really something which was very, very valuable for me as a policy analyst to be part of that team. The other element I would want to emphasize about my own experience here was the profound impact which the Israeli climate analysis that you had in 2021 and the report that the state comptroller came up with had the impact on the political process in our parliament. Recently, there were debates over climate law, and I'm surely hopeful that one will finally pass the Israeli legislature. But the number of times that the state comptroller's report was referred to by people on all sides of the issue was critical. In other words, it provided an objective basis that we could all get our arms around, a neutral source of information to help us along. And there were very, very specific recommendations. That's my final, observation, that the ability really to drill down and offer concrete suggestions, things that need to be done, targets and goals. This assists legislators and parliamentarians, and I myself was chair of a subcommittee afterwards in our parliament, to go forward and really take your recommendations and translate them into the kind of statutory language that we need if we are going to make the progress that we must make all over the world in addressing our common climate crisis.
Professor Tal, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and valuable perspectives with us. Your insights highlight the urgent need for proactive engagement for both governments and audit institutions and provide a strong foundation for further collaboration and action within the EUROSAI community. We look forward to continuing this important dialogue and to integrating these key messages into our ongoing work. Thank you again, and thank you all our colleagues for joining this session.